The season is coming to an end, and I have my guy Rob Lowder on to join me to talk about how the season has gone, certain things to look for from the 49ers as they enter the season finale. Keep it locked right here on Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On 49ers. I'm your host, former NFL and AFL defensive back, Eric Crocker. And as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube right now, not listening to the audio version, you're watching on YouTube, you see I got a special guest with me today, my guy, Rob Lowder, the host of the Strike and Go podcast. We're talking all things 49ers today. But first, I have to let you know that this show is brought to you by Prize Picks. All right, it's playoff time. And if you're like me, you want to make it the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where Prize Picks comes in to play. If you love football and you want a chance to win some real money while watching the game, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash money with daily fantasy player projections. All right, we're doing a little projecting in this episode with my guy Rob because we're going to project what the 49ers are potentially going to look like moving forward and what they look like in this game. But first, we got to start with Rob, man. How you doing? Strike and Go podcast host. We're honored to have you here on the Locked On 49ers.
I know, man. I think this is the first time I've been on here since you've been on here. Like, it's just you've been on the show. You've been on Strike and Gold a few times, but I don't know if I've ever been on here since you joined. But everything's great, man. I'm just running the show, just kind of doing things solo for a while. I still haven't, like, I don't know. You know who I am, man. Like, the vibes have to be immaculate. And I just still haven't found a co-host that I thought could replicate the vibes that we had. So I've been rolling solo for a while now, and I'm kind of okay with it, man. It's kind of nice, but go ahead.
So for those of you who don't know, Rob Lowder and I, we started Strike and Go podcast together, and we did that for 2 years before I came over to the Locked On Network.
Yeah, it was a while. And you were the one that called me and convinced me to do it. I was like, man, I don't know if I could do a podcast. I don't even like the sound of my own voice. I don't know if anybody wants to listen to me, and maybe they still don't, but at least we did it.
Well, I think we both had some funny voices, and I think that's why it works so well. What's not working, though, right now is the San Francisco 49ers, and you haven't been on this season. There's been a lot going on. 49ers, obviously, they're out of the playoffs, and they still have a game coming up. But I want to kind of get your thoughts on just how the season has gone, and, are you understanding because there's been so many injuries? Are there some things that you feel like, I was a little let down by this, but just kind of from start to finish, how was the season for you watching it as a 49er fan, as someone who covers the 49ers?
It was, and I've said this many times on the podcast, like, and you're probably very similar to me. And like, when I watch football, I kind of always look at it from like a coaching point of view. Like, I understand that these are professionals playing very high well above the caliber that I will ever understand. But I always look at things from a coaching point of view. That's where my mind always goes because I've been coaching for 10 years. But it was really hard to understand from that point of view how a team that, for the most part, had all the same pieces, and yeah, they lost a couple guys early due to injury, could look so different. And probably the biggest thing that I fell back on was going into the season and given the personnel, I kind of expected the defense to take a pretty big step back. You got a brand new defensive coordinator that's never done it before. A lot of you were looking at the roster, the defensive line was not nearly as stacked as we've seen it in the past. The safeties were a little unproven. So I expected the defense to take a step back. As big of a step back as they did, not really. But to me, the biggest and the hardest part to grasp this season was just how ineffective the offense was. Like, there were many games this season, despite the fact that the defense has taken a huge step back, the defense was better than the offense. And to me, the offense had way less excuses than the defense had. I know they didn't have CMC, but even in the beginning of the season, when they had most of their guys, they still looked weird, and all these things that we've come to expect from a Shanahan offense. The yards after the catch, the amount of separation, the guys catching passes wide open. And everybody loved to say that Kyle Shanahan could make it work with anybody, right? We've heard it over and over and over again. He can make it work with any quarterback. He can make it work with any running back. All he can get receivers in a receivers in a position to succeed. And like all of that went away this season. Like the yards after the catch were at an all-time low, some of the worst in the NFL. Receivers were creating some of the least amount of separation in the league. The red zone offense was one of the worst in the league. The points per game, the 49ers didn't have this few of points per game, and going all the way back until like 2017 when it wasn't even really Kyle Shanahan's team yet, or 2018 when the quarterback was out for the year. It's like, but they had far less excuses this year, but everything seemed like it was just weird. That's probably the best way to describe it. I know they went through hell as a team, and you have to attribute that. The amount of things that happened off the field this year, some heartbreaking stuff that has to be attributed to it. The amount of injuries, all of that obviously played a part. But again, even if you go back to the beginning of the year, it was still just weird. It never felt like things were clicking like they have in the past.
So Rob, you've been a credentialed member of the media, and were you around for the entire training camp this past season?
I did 2 weeks. So I missed like a week where I could have been there. I wasn't there, but that was it.
So did you foresee any of this coming? Obviously, there was no Brandon Ayuk while you were there because of the holdout. CMC, he was out. He had kind of the nagging calf/Achilles thing going on. Trent Williams, he was holding out. It always felt like from like a bird's eye view that the vibes were a little off, a little weird in training camp, and we expressed that several times on Locked On. But as someone who was there on the ground talking to Kyle Shanahan after practices, talking to the players, just seeing how the players were moving around, did you feel like, there's just something kind of missing from this team this season?
I didn't pick up on anything that I would think was weird enough to garner this result. You know what I mean? I didn't feel like I was watching a 6-10 football team. Like I didn't feel like I was watching something that was that much different than the 49ers last year that went to the Super Bowl. Like it's all, I mean, you know how it is at training camp, dude. Like it's always, for the most part, it's the defense beating the hell up out of the offense and all the crowd acting like that's a bad thing because they only want to see the offense do cool stuff. It was like there was different, there was undoubtedly some different vibes in the fact that Trent Williams wasn't there. Christian McCaffrey wasn't there. Brandon Ayuk wasn't there. And then that got more and more public as things went on and people started throwing rocks more and more. And I mean, it was definitely different, but at no point did I just sit there and go, this season, they're going to be competing for a top 10 draft pick. Like it was never a point where things just looked like they were that much different than they've ever been. And so that's why to me, it's like, I a little bit of it dumbfounds me. I don't understand how everything came together to create this version of the 49ers. The other years, you kind of understood it, man. 2017, they're just creating the team. It's a brand new roster. 2018, Jimmy Garoppolo's out, but Brock Purdy was there the whole season. A lot of their playmakers were there the whole season. The kind of the weirdness and the fact that it was so tough to quantify seeped into every part of the team. And in terms of training camp, though, I can't say I saw this coming. I can't.
Yeah, and I think that, that's the odd thing too, because even when you go to training camp practices, you watch the practice, you talk about, a lot of the times the defense starts off ahead of the offense. So, Deebo Samuel, he was making some plays downfield. I feel like as far as training camp goes, this might have been one of his better playmaking off seasons. And then you get into the actual season and we haven't seen that version of Deebo Samuel. Do you think that maybe Deebo took a step back? Maybe, just some of the talks in the offseason, potentially, trading him. People were kind of really throwing that around and speculating that. But the season definitely hasn't gone, I'm pretty sure, the way that he would have liked. What can you attribute to maybe this kind of drop off from Deebo Samuel?
I don't think that I don't think something like trade talk would affect him. I think it has to do with just the style he's played football for so long. Like he basically has the wear and tear of a running back. And we've seen Shanahan use him that way going all the way to this season. And you're right. He did look like he had a great training camp. He did look like he was a little bit sprier, a little bit quicker, in a little bit better shape. And this is a Deebo who we've talked about in the past, maybe showing up not in the best shape, and he's admitted to it. and that's resulted in like some hamstring stuff in the beginning of the season, some soft tissue stuff. But he hasn't had any of those excuses this year, and he still had Brock Purdy, and things still just couldn't click. And the only thing I can attribute to it with Debo is just wear and tear, man. Like he's been through it, he's done it, he's been one of the premier things. Like before CMC showed up, Debo was the CMC. You know what I mean? He was put through those amount of touches and those amount of paces. And I'm not going to say that Debo's attitude necessarily changed. It didn't look like he got lazier. It didn't look like he just didn't want to be here. It didn't look like he was like, well, if they're going to talk about trading me, I'm just going to have a mediocre season, which wouldn't really make sense for him because he still wants to be paid by somebody. You know, if that's not going to be the 49ers, he still wants to have success elsewhere. And it just seemed like things are kind of going the way of the inevitable. You know what I mean? What year was Debo drafted? Was it 18?
2019.
Okay. It's okay. So, I mean, that's really not that long, you know, but at the same time, we've seen how much Debo's been used. That's really all I can attribute it for because I haven't seen anything just out in the open. You're like, okay, that's a problem right there. He seemed kind of like the same old Debo personality wise. And like you said, he came in shape. It just seems like things might be catching up to him in terms of what he's able to do. And even the whole like can't get open against man coverage thing is a little weird to me because he wasn't always like that. Like he wasn't. I mean, in the Senior Bowl, he was going up against Rocky Sin and just tearing him up, and we were used to him creating like 8 yards of separation on a slant and then taking that to the house. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't always as. I don't want to say useless. That's mean. That's not what I mean. But you know what I mean. It seems like things have caught up to him.
Yeah, just did not have a strong season at all. Definitely not the season that a lot of people were hoping he had. Probably, definitely not the season that he thought he would have as well. There's another person that's maybe not having the season that he would have hoped, and that's Kyle Shanahan. So we're going to talk about Kyle Shanahan. We're going to get into some Brock Purdy, his contract negotiations, what you're thinking it may look like this offseason, and then finally get to the 49ers taking on the Arizona Cardinals. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's playoff time, and you know, if you're like me, man, you guys want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. Right now, it's kind of tough. They don't got much stuff on the 49ers. Dobbs going to be playing in this game, but I'm pretty sure by game time, you'll be able to put some stuff together. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats, like the total passing yards for Dobbs or rushing touchdowns on Garindo. And you can do this for a shot to make up to $1,000 your money that you put in. All right, you can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you are looking for a flex play to boost your payout, you want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks, they got all that covered for you. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. You know, I've been playing for a while now, and I've been having a blast. And this week, I'm eyeing, I don't know, maybe Jared Goff. I know who I won't be eyeing. Saquon Barkley, they're selling him short. He was going to be somebody automatic because he's going for that record, but not going Barkley. Maybe somebody that you really want to go to, Mike Evans. He's eyeing that was 11th straight season of over 1,000 yards. So, you know, they got a special right now, special offer for Locked On listeners. Download the app today and use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. This show is also brought to you by BetterHelp. All right, and I don't know if you guys want to make your 2025 story really good. Every January brings a new chapter, and I definitely see that new chapter when I go to the gym. Today is jam-packed. All right, but you got 365 blank pages waiting for you to fill. If there's part of your life you want to rewrite, and have a plot twist, why not do it right now? All right, don't wait. Life isn't about fleeting resolutions. It's about taking control and becoming your own author of your own story. So think of therapy as your personal editor. All right, helping you craft your life, the life that you deserve. It's not just a crisis situation. Therapy can help you develop healthier coping strategies, improve your relationships, and empower you to be the best version of yourself. Whether you are facing a challenging time or just looking for personal growth, therapy is the power tool to help you guide your journey. All right. So find someone to talk to, and you'll be gaining fresh perspectives that can make all the difference in the world for you and help you navigate through the life's ups and downs. Write your story with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/locked on today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. All right, Rob, we're going to get into Kyle Shanahan. And when you see seasons like this, I feel like it's kind of been all or nothing. It's like you see this amazing version of Kyle Shanahan where he's going to the conference championship game, maybe a play away from winning that, or going to the Super Bowl, having a double-digit lead, or it's just a team that is not sniffing the playoffs at all, as we've seen 4 times in the 8 years that he's been coaching. So the seasons like this, you talked about how, and I feel like it as well, there's enough players here to keep this thing going. There's enough players to keep this offense afloat. You still have George Kittle out there. Debo, while not having the season he won, he's made some plays, done some things. Juwan Jennings, I feel like he stepped up in a major way. Ricky Pearsall, young rookie. We've seen rookie receivers for the 49ers really start off slow, but as you can see with him and the other guys as well, he's starting to pick it up later in the season. The running back situation obviously has been up and down, but they've been able to get production out of guys. Like what the hell happened? And do you at all view Kyle Shanahan a little different for not the way he dealt with everything, because the 49ers had a lot of different situations going on and off the field, but just the results of a 6-win season for a coach that's looked at in such high regards?
I think a little bit. I mean, I don't necessarily look at him any different as a coach. Like I'm very much not anywhere near the whole fire Kyle Shanahan territory, Kyle Shanahan hot seat stuff. I'm not anywhere in that stratosphere. But it's still okay to acknowledge that things haven't gone anywhere near how they expected. And if anything, it's been flipped on its head in a way that I didn't quite think was possible. And for the first time, really, since Kyle Shanahan has got here, you've seen defenses that have been able to throw things at Shanahan that he doesn't look like he has the answer to. Kind of for the first time in a while. We've seen defenses blitz in a way that Kyle Shanahan's offense just doesn't have an answer to. We've seen Kyle defenses, just the way they schematically approach the 49ers offense, be able to kind of shut that offense down in a way that we've not been used to. And like you said, the big thing here is at no point during the season, I understand a lot of people got injured, but I always felt like they had enough talent on the field to still be effective, to still win football games. Like we just saw them. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say the Lions game was a good example of what the 49ers are capable of. There were still a ton of problems in that game, but they went toe to toe with the Lions for the most part. The Lions are one of the best teams in the NFL. And that was kind of, do you want to see a defense give up 40 points? Of course not. But you saw a team go punch for punch. At one point, it looked like the Lions defense had no answer for Kyle Shanahan's offense. Like that, in a way, like that's what we're used to seeing. And for some reason, that was rare this season. It looked like the offense, um, in some way, was surprised by what defenses were doing a lot of times throughout the season. Not to mention in like clutch moments. Like how many different times on like a 3rd and long did we see the defense blitz a player in a way that the 49ers offensive front couldn't account for it? And the offense would just end up having to throw. Brock Purdy would just have to throw some pass either into the dirt or short of the sticks. It just seemed like this year more than ever, defenses had an answer for Kyle Shanahan's offense, and made that offense look pedestrian this year. Some of the numbers are still great, but the ones that count, like the whole like scoring points deal, they're just they're right in the middle of the NFL, which is not what we're used to seeing, especially after last season where things were like hyper good, great, outstanding. So I don't look at Kyle Shanahan different in terms of like I think he's less worthy of the job now than he was in 2023. I just look at it as like, okay, it's painfully clear the defenses have finally started to get a hang of what they need to do to limit Kyle Shanahan's offense. How does he adjust? How does he go from here? I think that's a huge inflection point for Kyle Shanahan's just job with this organization is okay, for the first time, I think that if you go back through Kyle Shanahan's tenure, there's always been a reason the team has struggled when they struggled. 2017, nobody was going to hold that season against him. 2018, Jimmy Garoppolo tears his ACL early in the season. 2020, things were all over the place again. And this is the first season where everything was expected to work out and didn't. So I think that this offseason and the way they approach next season is going to be a huge thing we look back on when it comes to Kyle Shanahan's tenure as a head coach. How does he adjust to this right here? Where things just aren't working quite as well. I think Kyle Shanahan has the intelligence and the brain power to revamp his offense in a way. Is he stubborn? I think so. But at the same time, he doesn't seem like so stubborn that he's incapable of seeing that things just aren't working like they used to. And so I'm interested to seeing where he goes from here and how he changes things moving forward.
Do you change at all? Because we talked about, does the season change how you feel about Kyle at all? But Brock Purdy, you talked about him playing in pretty much every game. He missed the Bills game. Was it the Bills game? No, he missed the Packers game. Excuse me.
Right.
He missed the Packers game, and then obviously he's going to be missing this upcoming game. But this was a season where I felt like people wanted to see from Brock. And you never want to say, oh, let's take all this guy's weapons away. But you know what he looks like when he has everybody out there, right? You got Trent Williams, and you got George Kittle, and CMC, and Ayuk, and Debo, and Jawan Jennings. And, you know what that looks like. But when you start to kind of pick at some of those guys and make it a little bit more difficult, I felt like it gave him a little bit of a taste of what it's like for most quarterbacks.
Right.
Around the NFL. And that's not to say that, everybody's just hurt, but how many teams still have, you go out there like, man, I still got a first round receiver. I still got George Kittle. I still got Jawan Jennings, who's playing very well out there. I still got Debo Samuel, who's still here and there is making plays. And we got a run game that's able to keep going, right? I still felt like there was enough around him to where this didn't completely kind of fall off the wagon. And I was a little disappointed that come week 17, week 18, the 49ers had zero shot. I wasn't expecting him to, I'm going to carry this team to, the way that Mahomes has done at times when guys are hurt. They got one loss right now, the Kansas City Chiefs. Wasn't expecting that. But I would have liked to see just a little bit more fight in the 49ers, because in key moments, the guy that you're probably going to pay a ton of money to this offseason, he was like, you know what, I'm going to put this team on my back, and I'm going to figure out a way for us to win this game against the Cardinals. I'm going to figure out a way for us to win this game against the Rams 2 times. Now, I'm going to figure out a way to win this game against the Lions. And instead, in all of those games, when the 49ers had certain opportunities, it's close enough, and you got enough guys out there, he ended up turning the ball over. So that was just something that is, I don't know, do I look at it like this is just a learning lesson for him? Or do you say, you know what, this may just very well be a guy who he needs everybody to keep this ship from sinking?
It was all over the place, man, because I remember you and I talking before this season started, talking about what would the next evolution be for Brock Purdy. And it was really like either making plays in spite of an offensive play, obviously not working, but making a play anyways, or getting out of the structure of the offense and making plays that only he could make in that moment type of deal. That was kind of what you said would be Brock Purdy's next evolution. And I think there's definitely been moments throughout this season where we've seen him do those things. Unquestionable. Like, we've seen him make some absolutely ridiculous plays. We've also seen him make some plays where you're like, okay, that's some of them, like you and I were just talking about, like the middle field safety standing there like Michael Myers, doesn't even look like he's barely even in an athletic stance. He's so comfortable with what play is coming that he's just standing there like Michael Myers with his hands down at his side. And
here's the thing with that too, real quick, that I think a lot of fans, because they're like, well, he did a good job of disguising it. You, as a quarterback, you don't have to throw it there. like if pre-snap you're looking at Michael Myers in the middle of the field, he's just standing there, and then post-snap he's still just standing there. You don't have to throw to that end route by Pearsall. People are, oh, Pearsall rounded it. That pass was getting picked off regardless of however Pearsall ran his route. Like, the safety did not move. So you got to look there. Okay, that safety is not moving. I'm going to go to Jawan Jennings on this deep post curl route, and I'm going to hit that curl. And at least attempt that. That's better. There's not a safety just standing there in that window. So there were a lot of people that are talking about that and just kind of, trying to disguise it and whatnot. Like, no, you just can't make that throw. And that's when I would get pissed at my high school quarterback for making that throw.
Right.
I don't think that's just gotta learn, like that comes with experience. Like, no, Brock has played a lot of football. He started for dang near 4 years in college. He's been starting in the NFL since the second half of his rookie season. He has played enough to know
He's
if
played in the
there's a safety
playoffs. He's
standing
played
right
in the
there.
Super Bowl. Like
Yeah,
he's not a new guy now. And what I was going to say too was he talked in the offseason about, I think it was the offseason, about that quote from, I can't remember the quote from Tom Brady, or maybe there wasn't a quote, but he mentioned playing like Tom Brady. Like Tom Brady would if it's a 10-play drive, Tom Brady might throw it to the check down 7 times. If you're going to give them 7 or 8 yards per check down, Tom Brady's going to take it every time and then they're going to score a touchdown. And it will probably be a pass to a running back. Like, who cares? They're going to go down the field and they're going to score a touchdown. And Brock Purdy specifically talked about being more like Tom Brady, like taking what a defense is going to give you and executing your way down the field. It doesn't always have to be a big play. It doesn't always have to be a 30 to 40-yard shot down the field. Just take what the defense gives you and work your way down there. And I think we've seen so many times in these late drives where the interception ends up coming either from a silly decision or just trying to take too much at one time. And a lot of the interceptions Brock Purdy threw this year, there was quite a few of them that had some context to them, like that one to Juwan Jennings. I can't remember the team 2 or 3 games ago where he ran like a double move and got, I think it was the Rams, and got interfered with like twice. And Kyle Shanahan was like, there should have been 2 flags on that play. And Brock didn't think there'd
I
be any
thought that
way.
the contact was. So this is I try to be like kind of. I think 49er fans want me to be all 49ers, but I really try to look at it from both ways. So if you hear me talk
Right.
enough, it almost seems like I'm like getting on the 49ers about certain things or Brock Purdy or whatever. And really, I'm just calling it how I see it. That was very, very, very minimal contact. Like
Okay.
you can't put that contact on this is the reason why my guy threw this interception.
But there
When
were
it
too
gets
many
cut.
times where there was like, this is the reason why he threw this interception. This was the reason he threw this interception. And it's like at some point you just should probably start taking, especially when it comes to game winning drives or game sealing drives, start making decisions that are a bit safer. If for some reason there's these interceptions every time, and
Ha-
then
have you seen how many interceptions Lamar Jackson has thrown this year? He's thrown
like
4.
4, right?
And 3 of them, when you want to talk about context, 3 of them hit a guy in the hands, in the chest, bounced off of him, and a guy picks it off. One of them, it looked like the running back caught the ball, and as he's going to the ground, the linebacker takes it from him, and that was an interception. So, like, if those things are happening, like, cool, but
Right.
that's not what we're talking about here.
And there were some interceptions that bounced off somebody's hands, but everybody gets those. We've seen so many interceptions that weren't plays like that, that seemed like when after you saw the interception, you're like, did he really need to make that throw in this moment? You know, like it wasn't like there was 5 seconds left and he had no other choice but to huck it down the field. They were in situations where there was plenty of time left. All they needed was a drive to either seal the game or to win the game. And too often there was just a bad decision made. And on my notes when I was watching that Lions game, after he sailed that pass over Ricky Pearsall and threw that interception, I was like, all right, I'm chalking that up to like shit happens. Like it was a bad throw, no question. That stuff happens. Up until that point, he was having a phenomenal game. He looked great. But then you get to the interception thrown to Michael Myers, and you're like, all right, Lyle, like I can't give you that one. That's just purely it's right in front of you, man. Like the guy's right in front of you. He's in an all white uniform on a dark green field. He's just standing there. Nothing's being hidden. And yeah, they left that guy free based on the way the coverage was assigned, and that guy was free to kind of go wherever. But I want to see Purdy obviously be safer with the ball. He talked about wanting to be safer with the ball, and I see a couple comments talking with Jimmy G in there. There was a point where every time Jimmy Garoppolo threw the ball down the field, where you couldn't see the receiver he was throwing to, you were nervous. Like you're like, wait, why are you throwing it off the screen, Jimmy? Like, who are you throwing this ball to, and who's about to catch it? But for a long period of time, I was perfectly fine with Purdy chucking the ball around the field. He was just making all the throws you wanted him to make. And this is the first season with him where I started to question his decision making at any given time, because you would just wait for the interception, you know, and that's not really how things seemed with Purdy last season. But this year's version of Purdy seemed like it was much more. He was much more willing to turn the ball over, especially in situations where the very last thing they could do at that moment was turn the ball over.
We're going to get to the actual game that's about to happen this Sunday. San Francisco 49ers taking on the Arizona Cardinals, and maybe some young guys to kind of prop up and talk about what we're looking forward to seeing from them in this game. That and more coming up next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, and it's not too late to get in on regular season action on this Week 18 finale on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. All right, because right now, new customers can finish this season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All right, FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. All right, I love betting on which players are going to score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling, and really, there's nothing like it. So, which players will score touchdowns this week? You got to look at some of these incentives that guys have. And right now, it's Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is going to have a big payday if he scores one more touchdown. But DeAndre Hopkins, if he scores one more touchdown, he's getting a lot more money. So those are two guys right there. I'm willing to bet that they are someone you should put some money on. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Rob. 49ers, Arizona Cardinals. Do you just look at this game as like, okay, one last time, get to see the 49ers this year? Did they come out fighting? That's kind of something I've been looking forward to seeing. Like, are they playing with heart? Are they fighting? Have they quit on Kyle Shanahan? Like, no, I still think they're fighting. They're playing really hard. So that's cool. Like the Lions game, that was a game where people were like, 49ers going to get beat by 40. And 49ers had a chance to win that game. All right, now, Arizona Cardinals game, they're a team that's kind of playing bad. 49ers are not going to have Brock Purdy. They're heavily injured. But are there any young guys that you're looking forward to seeing how they perform in this game against Arizona?
I mean, I guess you could go with the obvious answers. Like I thought the Lions game was a huge step forward for Ricky Pearsall. And I don't know, man. Maybe it's because I have an affinity for receivers, but I always thought I'm like harder on receivers than most people. But I saw a lot of people that for some reason had lost a bunch of all their faith in Ricky Pearsall, or they already thought it was like a bust, or they already thought things were going the wrong way with him. And I'm like, there's been a couple things, there's a couple penalties were pretty bad and stuff like that, typical new guy stuff. But I hadn't seen anything from Pearsall that made me feel like things weren't going to work out. You know what I mean? It's just the dude got shot this offseason. Like things were going to be weird.
Crazy.
And it was good to see him finally have that moment in the spotlight where he was like that dude. And not all of those catches were like just layups. Like that touchdown he caught was a big boy touchdown going up and over the top of a DB, in front of the DB. And I talked on the pod earlier today. I was like, if he bobbles that ball even a little bit, it's not a touchdown, because the only reason it was a touchdown was the fact that he caught it when it touched his hands, and that made it across the goal line, and they gave him 6. 8 catches for 140 something yards and a touchdown. Like those are big boy numbers. And he looked good, man. I don't know if all of his routes were just schemed open, but a lot of the time when he was catching the ball, he had a lot of separation. So that's good for him. And the Lions defense is a solid defense. And he had that one-handed little bobbling catch right at the sideline. That was cool. Not a bobbling catch. He just had to kind of tip it to himself a little bit. So I'm looking forward to watching Ricky Pearsall, man, because things can pile up pretty quickly in Kyle Shanahan's offense, whether it's just difficult to be there, or Kyle Shanahan's really hard on receivers because he was one, or whatever. I mean, we saw it with Brandon Ayuk in his first year. It was cool to see Ricky Pearsall have that game, and I'm looking forward to seeing if he continues to do that against the Cardinals. That's an easy one to pick. It's all money in the bank for Pearsall, man. It's all confidence going into an offseason. And it makes the 49ers just it clarifies things a little bit for them. Like, well, what can we count on Pearsall for this next season? Like, can they count on Pearsall with a little bit more production in the beginning of the year while Brandon Ayuk inevitably works himself back into the offense? Is it going to be the Pearsall and Jennings show to start out the season? Is Debo even still going to be here? We don't know. So I think Pearsall stacking a couple good games would just give everybody in the building just a little bit more confidence, which would be cool. Um, I like Isaac Grendo a lot. I think he's kind of been able to take on the role of that dude. I think he's offered a little bit more as a receiver than I expected, even though he
Yeah.
used to be one. He still looks like a very competent receiver. He's getting open. Um, he's got good hands. I've seen him make a couple catches where the ball is out and away from his body, which is always fun to see. Um, Trying to think of any other guys I want to see. I'd like to see somebody on some young player on the defense, maybe Malik Mustafa, not go flying by the ball carrier and then just let him run for another 6 or 7 yards. I feel like that happens almost every single play for the 49ers. Like, cool, you got there really fast, man, but he's still going. You know what I mean? Like, Dominic Pooney obviously has to be on the list. It's a little harder to pay that close of attention to offensive linemen, but if you think about it, like with the way the offensive line is going, he's like the new beginning. Like if the 49ers offensive line is ever going to kind of get to a point where they're comfortable with all five pieces, let's say Trent Williams is still there, but everybody else is likely getting replaced. Dominic Pooney's going to be like the new guard, like the new set. Like he might be the only guy that's on that team now that's on that offensive line in like 2 years. So it's exciting to see him. I think he's like the third ranked guard in the NFL in terms of the eyes of Pro Football Focus, which is
Wow.
like, hey man, like that's huge. So in terms of young players, those are really the only young guys I'm watching. D Winters isn't necessarily a young player anymore, but he's finally getting some extended reps, which kind of look encouraging at times. Um,
He's another guy that he can fly by somebody, then he can fly into somebody, and it's really like a uh-oh, with him, or it's like a uh-oh, it's you get one or the other, but I've liked seeing some of the plays that he's trying to make. The area I would like to see him get better because I think he's doing a terrific job going downhill, like anything in front of him, sideline to sideline, he's doing very well. It's the coverage part of things. And he's put it to some tight spots. It's like, oh, I gotta try to guard Gibbs in space. That's probably you want it to be a strength of his because of the athleticism that he has. And we've seen a guy like Fred Warner play so well in space. Drake Greenlaw play so well in space. I think that's an area where D Winters can definitely improve a little bit, and something even against the Arizona Cardinals, I would like to see, like, with whatever backs they have, or if he ends up somehow getting matched up against that big tight end out of Trey
Trey
McBride.
McBride, yeah.
Oh man, I mean he's awesome, and he's seeing a ton of passes. If you get matched up with him, what does that look like? Can you check that guy? So it's a good game. I think for D Winters to really challenge himself in coverage because the run part of things I think has been solid.
Well, and he had that play too against the Lions. I don't know who it was. They tried to throw it, a little something into the flat, and he came up and like affected the guy like 3 or 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage, but missed the tackle. And somebody ended up coming and cleaning it up. I think it was still like a loss of like maybe a yard, but he
Yeah.
got up celebrating. I was like, dude, you didn't make the tackle. Like he got by you, and then they like, and I get what he's celebrating is the fact that play might have worked a lot better if he wasn't there. But it's just you see it so often. I've had people ask me this because we do the takeaway time after every game, and they're asking me like, Rob, what can an NFL team do to get better at tackling? And I'm like, I don't know, man, because you never see them do those types of drills in NFL practices. It's almost like they're they've played so much football. The tackling is what it is when you get to the NFL, but it's gotten so bad for the 49ers that you're like, will somebody just do some tackling drills around here? Like, can we just like take a step back a little bit? Because they just don't do stuff like that in training camp anymore. I'm assuming they think they don't have time to cover stuff like that, but 49ers seem like they just miss tackles so often that somebody's got to take a step back and be like, we got to do something about it.
Not a whole lot of tackling drills going on at the NFL level. And you and I, you coach middle school football, I coach high school football. And, a lot of times, especially when summer starts or like August, as soon as we put the pads on, first thing we're doing at practice is, hitting, doing pads. And at
Trying
Edison
to
High
figure
School, I
out
coach
what you can
there.
do that's still legal.
Well, yeah, but we can
Right.
still tackle. That's for sure. We
Right.
can still hit each other. And, one thing I feel like that we probably got away from at Edison this past season, and I don't know how much of it they're doing at the NFL level, pursuit drills.
I
Like
know.
just
I
the
mentioned that
regular
too.
pursuit drills where you put the rabbit out there,
Go
the
that way.
rabbit, yeah, the rapid runs, you got to turn and run. Everybody takes their angles, and gets to the ball carrier. But I think we could have done a better job of doing just that drill, and it would have helped our tackling, right? Like just some of the basic things. And at the NFL level, they're definitely not doing it. So it's just relying on everybody to be a professional and fly to the ball and hit guys. But we've seen guys take bad angles, and sometimes it's as simple as, hey man, those offensive guys, they get paid too. They're talented too, so maybe that's why you missed. But at the rate that the 49ers have missed tackles this season, that's definitely something you would like to see them improve on.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned pursuit because I mentioned that in the pod too. And I'm like, man, it would be so funny to just see an NFL team out on the field doing the little run the rabbit pursuit drill. All 11 guys have to get to where he stopped, and they all have to keep running until everybody gets there. And then, like,
Yeah,
it would be so funny if they were doing that. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know why they. I don't know. I just don't know why. I guess it comes down to, like you said, every player doing their job. They're all professional football players. They're all professional defensive football players. They need to be able to tackle. They need to be able to put a hit on somebody. And maybe a team doesn't feel like they can really sacrifice time to something like that anymore. But it certainly is a consistent problem with the 49ers over the past few years, to a point where you're like, hey, what can you do, man? Maybe we should do a little bit of pursuit out here. But yeah.
Marquise in the chat says they need to get Robert Saleh back. Any thoughts on Robert Saleh putting on that scarlet, red, and gold next season?
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me, but I mean, people are pretty quick to forget that things weren't always roses under Sala either. Like there were there was not many years, but there was many times where people wanted Sala gone just as bad as they may or may not want Sorensen gone. And because Sala was a brand new defensive coordinator, and I think if you're getting in terms of the defense, like it's hard to quantify. But I would put just as much of the defensive performance on John Lynch as I would Nick Sorensen. Like,
Mm.
you've got some injuries in there, but to me, when I was looking at that roster to start the season, I never thought they were going to be anything close to what they've been in the past. I was looking at the defensive line. They let Eric Armstead go. He got paid by the Jaguars. They brought in Malik Collins, Javon Hargrave. Like, I was looking at the defensive line, and I'm like, Malik Collins is not known as a run-stopping guy. Javon Hargrave, not known as a run-stopping guy. Leonard Floyd, not really known as a run-stopping guy. Nick Bosa is pretty good against the run. But, I mean, he's only one dude, and then sure enough, they weren't good against the run. You know what I mean? It was like a lot of this stuff came down to the fact that the personnel just got to the point. The 49ers used to build from the trenches with pride. Like, how many defensive linemen did they take in the first round in a row? Like 4 or 5
It was
years
a
in a
lot.
row?
Well, the biggest issue to me is you used 3 first-round picks on Trey Lance, and then you turned around and traded a second, third, fourth, and fifth-round pick for Christian McCaffrey. And I think a combination of that kind of made it tough to like acquire some of that talent that you needed to add on the defense. You were banking on having this, crazy talented quarterback pay off to where, hey man, we can kind of overcome maybe not having the best defense, maybe not having the best pass rush year in and year out. And as you can see, when you have a guy like Brock, and Brock is solid for sure, but clearly Brock isn't like some of the other guys capable of overcoming all of the things that the 49ers had to go through this year. And when I say overcome, like I'm not asking to be 13-3 heading into this weekend, but right now the Atlanta Falcons are 8-8. And I feel like their division is just as weak as the 49ers division. Like, could you be 8-8? Could you be 9-6 right now or 9-7 or whatever? Like, could that be more where the 49ers are as opposed to a 6-win team? And I think a quarterback that's just a little bit more especially talented would have added a couple more wins to this 49ers team than Brock did this year. And I don't want to like harp on Brock like he's a good quarterback, but I think he's good in the right moments in a very specific scenario. And I don't think that this season scenario was like the best fit for like what he is as a quarterback.
I think if you're and before I move on off the defense stuff, like I'm not saying that Nick Sorensen has nothing to do with the defensive struggles. The 49ers couldn't figure out how to cover like a bunch set all season long. Like there were things like anytime an offense came out in trips, you almost assumed they were going to get a catch. Like there was definitely some schematic things that and some coaching things that the defense just didn't seem quite prepared for pretty often. Like, I mean, you had that fourth down against the Lions where they busted a coverage and the Sam Laporta caught a pass for like 13 yards on like 4th and 3. There's some stuff going on where you're like, hey, like it's obviously schematic. It just seems like the talent, the star power on the defense was so much less this year than it's been in years past. Then if you come back to Brock, like I think we've seen enough from Brock to know that he has the tools necessary to consistently be a good quarterback and even a great quarterback. I think that he's got a really high floor. Like he's shown you like what bad Brock looks like and what great Brock looks like. And bad Brock isn't nearly as bad as we've seen some 49ers quarterbacks
Not at
be.
all.
But I think the problems, the mistakes he's made this season are things that can be fixed. I think it's just a little bit of experience, a little bit of maybe adjusting your mentality at certain stages of the game, just kind of knowing when to be smart with the football and knowing you don't always have to be aggressive. It's not like, you know, he hasn't quite gotten to the point with me yet where I'm like, okay, I'm concerned about this and we should probably start looking elsewhere for other options. Like I haven't gotten that yet. I think the entire
Because
team.
even in games like like he played well in that game. It's not like you watch him for the entire game and say, "Gosh, this guy stinks." Right? You're not
Right,
thinking that
right,
ever.
right.
And you could see that with a lot of guys. You talked about him having a high floor. I think we always see the high floor version of him. And then at times you do see like a greater version of him. So
Right.
even in the games where the 49ers lost, and I'm kind of getting on him for certain things, like it's not like you played like bad, but could you play all the time, and not even all the time, but in some of those games, can you play to what the 49ers need in that moment? And I think that's where I would like to see him improve a little bit. Uh, Rob, we're going to get out of here right now, but we're going to have to probably do part 2 of this where we really kind of dive into a lot of the offseason, a lot of, just our thoughts on even certain players and not just, harping on Brock, but some of the other guys like, what are the 49ers going to do long term with a guy like Jawan Jennings? Because I thought he held things together
I would
this year
give
for
him
the 49ers.
another extension this offseason. Like,
Yeah.
I know they just gave him one. Give him another one because
Give him another one. And you got Debo Samuel. What's gonna happen with him? So we're gonna talk more about the offseason. We're gonna talk more about everything pertaining to the San Francisco 49ers. Shout out to my guy Rob for joining me today. You guys can find him on X at Rob_Lowder. And you guys make sure you guys download, listen to his podcast, Striking Gold. But that's gonna do it for this episode. Prayers up to my guy Brian Peacock. He'll be back at some point, but no rush. He's handling everything over there. We'll make sure we hold it down here, right here, Locked On 49ers. Peace.